This week on Newsnight, hurricane season gets underway amid concerns over the readiness of FEMA and the National Weather Service. Plus, a look at the latest on developments at NASA, from the agency's leadership and priorities to questions over funding. Newsnight starts now.
Hello, I'm Steve Mort. Welcome to Newsnight, where we take an in-depth look at the top stories and issues in Central Florida and how they shape our community. First tonight, the president this week said a process of phasing out FEMA would take place after hurricane season. It comes after a recent shake-up of senior executives at the agency, and this week CBS News reported the head of FEMA's National Response Coordination Center would be leaving. Both the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which includes the National Weather Service, have experienced cuts under the Trump administration. NOAA forecasts and tracks hurricanes. FEMA helps states prepare and respond. We'll get into the political issues in just a moment, but first let's hear from Jessie Schaper, a meteorologist from the National Weather Service in Melbourne. She says hurricane prediction technology has improved dramatically in recent years.
This hurricane season, we are anticipating an active season like we've seen the last several years, but it's important to know that it only takes one storm. Regardless of the seasonal forecast, whether we're expecting above normal or below normal, it only takes one storm to impact a community, so you want to be prepared regardless. Hurricane forecasting has exponentially improved over the last several years from the addition of more data that we're receiving from both the NOAA and the Air Force hurricane hunters flying into hurricanes. We also have equipment that goes out into the sea that's able to record information from the storm. All of that data is added into the hurricane forecasting models, and it's actually helping this forecast become more improved. So the size of the cone of uncertainty, it's actually shrinking. If you look back in years past, the cone had a much larger diameter than it does today. So forecasting between the track and the timing is greatly increased in our confidence over the last several years.
Jessie Schaper from the National Weather Service. To note, some 600 positions were eliminated at the Weather Service earlier this year, but the administration has since taken steps to hire some workers to stabilize operations. Well, let's bring in our panel now to break it all down. And joining us in the studio this week, Beth Cassup, editor of the Winter Park Voice. Good to see you, Beth.
Yeah, good to be here.
Donovan Myrie, coming back to the program from WKMG News 6. Good to see you, Donovan.
Thank you for having me, sir.
And Alexa Lorenzo from WFTV Channel 9. Good to see you, Alexa.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming in. Alexa, let me start with you. What do we know about the Trump administration's vision for FEMA, if you like, and the changes so far under the acting director, David Richardson?
So we've heard since the election and the campaign conversations that the president wanted to phase out FEMA, and it was something that he said from the beginning, but we never had a timeline of that and what that would look like. Recently, he did say after this year, after this hurricane season, he wants to phase out FEMA, putting the responsibility financially and boots on the ground, resource-wise, in the hands of the states. Some states say, we got this, we can handle it. Other states say, this is going to be a difficult lift.
Yeah.
And at this point, they're looking at how they're going to handle this hurricane season with less staff, because as we just mentioned, they lost a chunk of that. About 10% gone already. It could be up to 30% by year's end. And at this point, under the current administrator, they're going off of last year's plan, going into this year's season, which is going to be a difficult lift given the cut staff.
The fewer resources,
Correct.
Yeah. Well, let's get into this a little bit, Beth. I mean, how have these cuts to FEMA been received by experts in forecasting and storm recovery?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty because FEMA has never gone into a storm season under this kind of staffing pressure before. So people are saying that there could be issues, and as we just heard, all it really takes is one storm to wreak havoc. It doesn't necessarily take what we saw in 2004, a big long series of storms. But on the state level, I've seen state officials try to provide some reassurance that everything will be okay. But I do think there's even more uncertainty than usual heading into this season.
I want to talk a little bit more about the state in a moment. Before I come to you, Donovan, I want to play a clip from the former FEMA acting administrator Cameron Hamilton, who was replaced a day after saying this at a congressional hearing.
As the senior advisor to the president on disasters and emergency management and to the Secretary of Homeland Security, I do not believe it is in the best interest of the American people to eliminate the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Okay.
Having said that, I'm not in a position to make decisions and impact outcomes on whether or not a determination such as consequential as that should be made. That is a conversation that should be had between the President of the United States and this governing body on identifying the exact ways and methodologies in which what is prudent for federal investment and what is not.
Cam Hamilton there, who lost his job after those remarks to a congressional panel. Donovan, do we know how Congress feels about all of this?
Well, I think for Congress, they're looking at FEMA in the sense of this is a giant agency.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money. I think the biggest thing about FEMA is everything is temporary. I'm going to temporarily fix this, I'm going to temporarily fix that. How do you get to the point of I'm going to completely fix something? And I think we know that there are problems with FEMA, and I think for Congress, they're trying to figure out how to solve those problems without just coming in and destroying the entire thing. There's a bipartisan group that's basically making a pitch to take FEMA out of Homeland Security, make it a cabinet-level position. They're trying to move forward. We don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty with how we're going to go forward.
We don't know how the administration is going to view those or what plans they might have themselves. A lot of unknowns for sure. What about the county and city level response, Alexa? WFTV has looked at what these changes to FEMA might mean for those responses in Central Florida. What do you guys find?
So FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program was cut. A lot of our counties reach through that program to get what they need. We'll start in Seminole County. They asked for $300,000 to get a generator for their shelters for individuals with special needs. That money's no longer there because that program was cut. We saw the same request in Marion County and Sumter County, asking for money for them to, in turn, get the infrastructure they need, different resources, and they're met with, sorry, we can't help you. So a few of them are now dipping into their reserves. Some have said, we'll figure it out. Others have been a bit more open and said, we're kind of scrambling right now and we're just scratching the surface. If we do ask for more, we know that we don't have that in our back pocket.
Just don't have it. News 6 has been looking at this as well. What are you guys finding? Something similar?
Something similar to the effect of my colleague Laverne McGee. She was down in Osceola County, and basically the folks down there said, we're wondering who's going to pick up this slack. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not as if you just have a pile of money going, you know what, when there's a problem, we'll take care of it. We've been used to relying on FEMA, but now not only is the money not there, the people aren't there. You're talking 1,800 full-time staffers took buyouts, 200 more who are on probation were basically shown the door. You may have people to fill in, but those might not be the people with the institutional knowledge to know what to do when it's time to do it. So it's, and it's experience. And it's not just a matter of money. This is all a whole new thing. Hey, you're a great quarterback. By the way, you need to be a tight end today.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that relationship between FEMA and the states. Governor DeSantis says he wants FEMA to shift to issuing block grants that can then be distributed by the states themselves for recovery efforts. He's been critical of the federal response to Hurricanes Milton and Helene last year and says he supports President Trump in reducing FEMA bureaucracy.
What he's objecting to is the FEMA bureaucracy. I think it's the administration's intent to block grant money to the states and let us administer it. So all the things that FEMA does, where you have individual assistance, where you have response or reimbursements for things like debris removal, if you just calculated typical hurricane how much, and you gave us 80 cents on the dollar on that, but cut out the bureaucracy, I'll bet you that money would actually go further. My message to the president, send us the money. Send us the money and let us administer it. Now, I don't think that's going to happen this hurricane season because I think the reality is there's going to need to be more lead up than the time they've had in office thus far. But if they eventually get to that place, I think you could potentially remove a lot of the heartache in these post-storm things. You know, I'm talking about Helene and Milton. We're cleaning debris, restoring power, we're doing all this. Well, then what happens is these homeowners end up in this stasis with having to deal with FEMA. Was this FEMA, this? And it's all about bureaucracy and red tape.
Governor DeSantis there. Beth, you mentioned the relationship with the states. The governor has long said that Florida always takes the lead anyway on storm recovery. How are state officials, do you think, viewing this sort of uncertainty about FEMA's readiness this year?
Yeah, so you just heard it from the governor himself. He's saying, look, we already do this work and we'll continue to do that work. And everyone would be better off if we were just given the funds and we dispersed them. And there's certainly perhaps, some merits to that argument. I think, though, what's important to know is that we will all wait and see how this turns out in a time of crisis. So we're talking about a situation, as many of us know all too well, in Florida, where people are without power, without air conditioning, without refrigeration for their food, without homes, with roofs and buildings being destroyed. The reason people are dealing with FEMA for months and weeks after storms is because they are in great need. So, again, the level of uncertainty here is unprecedented.
There have been reported discussions, Alexa, over making it harder for states to qualify for federal assistance. What do we know from that reporting?
Reporting shows there was a memo sent out about how they'll be able to reduce the number of emergency declarations.
Yeah.
And they're just going to make it harder to get. There is a per capita metric. That's how they assess how much money would be needed to help the area for damage. And that memo says, okay, we'll be able to drastically reduce the money we give out by essentially quadrupling the damage needed in an area for us to send out the money.
Changing the formula, yeah.
Which, all in all, essentially eliminates any sort of small disaster declaration. They're saying, we'll give you money if the disaster is big enough, if the scale of it is large enough. So that makes it really hard for those small communities impacted by tornadoes. They're saying, we got you in a big hurricane, we're not going to do the small stuff anymore.
It's important to note, though, isn't it, Donovan, that it's not just during the Trump administration where FEMA has had funding issues.
This goes back a while. We're talking all the way back to, Hurricane Maria down in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
There was one article I was reading, and we keep hearing about mismanagement. We keep hearing about the bureaucracy. And in this article, two gentlemen had written an opinion piece for The Hill. They're part of a federal whistleblower lawsuit, and they were going into details about how badly FEMA botched the response down in Puerto Rico, about the people who were there, renting generators versus buying them. And essentially, we don't know exactly how FEMA operates. We think we do, but we're not workers in there seeing how it goes every day. There is some merit to this in FEMA's not doing the best job they can do. And, part of this push, like anything else, is there should be a change. How dramatic do you want that change, or do you do it bit by bit? And I think for this administration, they have their foot on the gas and they're not letting up.
And as Beth mentioned, the immediate concern is what it means for all of us in Central Florida this hurricane season. I guess we'll have to wait and see. As we enter hurricane season, though, this is a good time to remind you about Meet the Helpers. It's a WUCF initiative designed to support the well-being of young children, helping them understand emergencies like hurricanes and explain the news in age-appropriate language. You can find more about it at meetthehelpers.org. Okay, next tonight, the Florida Board of Governors will decide whether to approve new presidents at a number of state universities soon. They include former Lieutenant Governor Janet Nunez at Florida International University and Florida Department of Education Commissioner Manny Diaz at the University of West Florida. Last week, the board rejected the candidate chosen to lead the flagship University of Florida, despite unanimous support from UF's Board of Trustees. The selection of Santa Ono, the former president of the University of Michigan, followed a months-long search process. But concerns among some conservatives about his past positions on DEI programs and his handling of pro-Palestine protesters derailed the hiring at a meeting last week in Orlando.
Public universities exist to educate, not to indoctrinate.
Santa Ono, who was announced in May as the sole finalist for UF's top job, addressed questions from members of Florida's Board of Governors for some 3 hours, fielding questions on issues ranging from merit-based admissions, climate change and Palestine protests, to his views on gender-affirming care and diversity, equity and inclusion programs.
What was the renewed adversity you were speaking of, if not the reforms taking place, not just in Florida, Texas, and other places?
Yeah, I don't think we were referring to Florida or Texas. I don't recall. I don't remember what I was saying at that time.
You don't remember. This is your last statement. We must not back down in the face of renewed adversity. What were you referring to then?
I don't remember because I didn't know I was going to be talking about this document until now.
If racism is America's original sin, and those are your words, I mean, what does that mean?
I would say that I regret the use of those words at that time. I don't remember exactly when I said it, but I should have been more precise.
It's 2023.
Yeah, so I think I should have been much more careful about my use of words. I hear where you're coming from.
Ono received the backing of UF leaders and has not been opposed by Governor DeSantis, whose focus on higher education has included strong opposition to DEI in public institutions. And Santa Ono's supporters pushed back on his opponents last week.
I've been on this board for 5-6 years, and we have never used this as a forum to interrogate. And in this case, it feels to me patently unfair.
You all decided today is the day we're going to take somebody down.
In the end, a divided Board of Governors voted 10-6 to reject Ono, despite his pledges on DEI and other issues.
Yes, my visions have evolved, as you've heard, but over 18 months since 2022. And I'm here to ensure that DEI never returns to the University of Florida.
A disclaimer, WCF is licensed to the University of Central Florida, which is part of the state university system. Donovan, let me start with you on this one, if I can. How unusual was this decision by the Board of Governors?
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
This is, when I was going through my notes last night, all I could keep thinking of was, this is the right guy at the wrong time. 2 years ago, this wouldn't have been a problem. You're taking a president for one of the top universities in the country and bringing him to UF so UF can get to that level of being like a University of Michigan. And he basically ran into a buzzsaw. And that buzzsaw is the Board of Governors, 17 people, 14 of them who are appointed by Governor DeSantis to 7-year terms. We haven't had a Democratic governor in this state since the late 90s. So there is this fall in line thinking, get in step with what I'm thinking or be shown the door.
Right candidate at the wrong time. I mean, the Board of Trustees, Beth, did approve Santa Ono unanimously. It did seem that he was on the same page as university leaders in Gainesville.
Oh, absolutely. It looks like this candidate went to great lengths to align himself, align his thinking, show the UF trustees, right, and the state board, as you just heard there, that his thinking had evolved, that he was willing to stay in line with some of these ideological issues that the governor has made a priority for the state. And then at the same time also run the strongest university in the state and one of the strongest public universities in the country. So I'm not sure what more he could have done there to show that he was willing to walk that line.
I wonder what this means for UF. Could this be a problem, do you think, Alexa, for the university as they go forward?
I think it's going to depend on how long this is going to take.
Yeah.
It was a 5-month-long process to select Ono, and we got where we got.
Yeah.
How long is UCF going to be with it, or UF rather, going to be with an interim president? It breeds some sort of a culture of instability. While President Fox did elevate the university to incredible rankings and standings, he resigned. It's not a job that he wants to hold for a long time. So how long is it going to take to find their person? And the university hasn't given us a clear-cut path of what's next, what measures they're going to take to find the right person for the job. But they did say the integrity of the search is not going anywhere. They're going to do another deep dive to find the person. But again, The clock is ticking. We don't know how long an interim president is going to last.
And these hires at state institutions do take a long time.
Right.
There seems to be a great deal of uncertainty about how this is going to play out going forward. I think it's fair to say, Beth. I mean, I wonder beyond UF whether this could become an issue for other state institutions, for other colleges and universities in the state who are trying to attract top-level talent.
In Florida, certainly, and I think across the country as well. This will give some leeway to boards that may have been a little hesitant to take a step that went as far as this. And they will feel emboldened by this, which is kind of the climate we've seen take off nationally when it comes to trying to dilute the power of academic institutions in this country, and certainly in the state of Florida. It's going to be rough. I mean, the state has taken great pains to cloak the process of selecting university presidents in as much secrecy as possible.
That was a piece of legislation.
Yes, the legislation, and there have been pains to make the jobs more attractive by letting candidates stay in the dark while they're applying, so they don't upset the institution they're currently at. But now we've seen even that go wrong. So yeah, it's going to be hard to attract people in this climate, and especially people with the type of academic credentials and wherewithal and leadership that the University of Florida is really looking for.
And it'll be really interesting to see. But that is all the time we have for this part of the program. My thanks to Beth Kasser, Donovan Myrie, Alexa Lorenzo. Thank you guys so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time. Good conversation today. Meanwhile, be sure to join the conversation on social media. We're at WCF TV on Facebook and Instagram. You'll also find us at Newsnight WCF on X. Okay, finally tonight, there's been a lot of attention in recent days on the public falling out between President Trump and Elon Musk. But before that, the president's decision to withdraw Musk ally Jared Isaacman's nomination to head NASA took many observers by surprise. The billionaire entrepreneur and pilot was just days from receiving a Senate confirmation vote. The White House says a new nomination will come soon, sparking speculation about the future direction of NASA. I talked about it all recently with Brendan Byrne, who hosts the space podcast Are We There Yet? For Central Florida Public Media. We recorded this discussion last week. A reminder, things can change by airtime.
Jared Isaacman is an entrepreneur. He started a company called Shift4. It's a payment processor. But he really got an interest in space and aeronautics. He's a fighter jet pilot. And he bankrolled quite a few private space missions. The first one, Inspiration 4. This was the first all-private orbital mission that flew in support of St. Jude. He's also bankrolled a series of missions, a part of Polaris program, Polaris Dawn. The first one we saw fly a few months ago, where he did the first private spacewalk from a Dragon capsule. Very closely knit with SpaceX, has a stake in the company, and has purchased a lot of flights to go to space. So he's an astronaut.
Certainly collaborated with that company a lot. What do we know then about the president's decision to pull that nomination? Do we know why?
We know what the president and the White House have publicly said. And when they pulled the nomination, they said that the head of NASA needs to be in lockstep with policy decisions of the administration. That is what they were saying, why they pulled. We can make some assumptions, right? Both Jared Isaacman and Elon Musk were very close. There has been a very public falling out between the president and Elon Musk. But this nomination was weeks, if not days away, so the timing of it is very suspect for them to not think that he aligned with their policies after all of this vetting that they did to get him in that position in the first place.
Well, what response have you been hearing from inside and outside the agency?
That is a terrible decision. It's very difficult to find someone within the agency or outside of the agency that thinks this is good. Isaacman was a strong supporter of the space program. There had even been some talks that he was kind of supporting not cutting certain things from the budget. From the private standpoint, the commercial side was very much looking for someone who is a visionary like Isaacman to lead that agency into new territory. So they were very much looking forward to him. It's difficult to find someone who didn't agree with the president or with Isaacman outside of the president.
Is there any speculation as to who may replace Isaacman as the nominee, and do we know when an announcement may come?
We don't know when an announcement may come. There have been some rumblings almost immediately after the nomination for a former Air Force Lieutenant General Stephen Quast. That has been the name that has been floated around. He has been very public about the militarization of space and taking things on more of a war-fighting domain as opposed to the more of the civil side of things. So that's caused some concerns with him at the helm. But again, that has not been made official. That's just kind of the rumblings that we have. We don't know when that is going to be made official. And it's taken us this long to get Isaacman as far, so we know that we are at least months away from actually knowing who the next NASA administrator will be.
Well, the other thing that's on the minds of those that work for NASA is the budget. The last time we talked about the White House's skinny budget, so-called, that it sent to the Hill. That had big NASA cuts in it. The full budget proposal from the White House has now been released. What do we see in it? How does it compare?
So it's very close to the skinny budget in the sense of how much it is. So we're looking at about 25% cut in the budget. What we did see in this budget proposal that came out of the White House is the actual things that will be cut. We're looking at a huge cut to science divisions. We're looking at already functioning and exceeding and excelling missions like Juno, which is exploring Jupiter, New Horizons, which is beyond Pluto, exploring the Kuiper Belt. Those would be cut. And it's not like you can just send another one back out, but there's already been billions and billions of dollars invested in these things as well. And also there's the people. We're looking at a third cut, or a reduction in a third of the people that work for NASA's workforce. This would be detrimental and has, as folks at like the Planetary Society have said, this is an extinction level event when it comes to NASA sciences.
Brendan Byrne. Before we go, we wanted to note that as we record this program on Thursday, families and community members in Orlando are marking 9 years since the tragedy at Pulse. Florida lawmakers have approved $394,000 in state funding for a permanent memorial at the site, with construction expected soon. Meanwhile, as progress is made on the memorial, we'd like to take a moment to remember the 49 who lost their lives on June 12, 2016.